A significant pattern change is building across the United Kingdom. And whilst we've been dealing with rather unsettled, mild conditions this week, that is all about to shift as high pressure develops over Scandinavia. The question isn't whether things will change. The question is how cold it gets and whether we are looking at a repeat of the beast from the east. Let me take you through what's happening right now, what the models are showing, and what you need to prepare for over the coming days and into early February. Right now, conditions across the country are typically January. Nothing spectacular. The Wirral saw heavy snow earlier today. Parts of Scotland have been dealing with minus temperatures and sharp winds. Meanwhile, across southern England, we're re-looking at top temperatures around 10 degrees Celsius with sunny spells. A mostly dry day for England and Wales, with cloud clearing northwards through the afternoon. But there's rain moving in from the south tonight. And that S part of a larger pattern that S has been dominating our weather this week. Low pressure systems trying to push in off the Atlantic but not making much progress eastwards. They're re-slowing down. Some are practically stationary over the Republic of Ireland. And there is a reason for that. A large area of high pressure is building over Scandinavia. This isn't fully consolidated yet. Over the next few days, it will strengthen and push the jet stream southwards. That means weather systems approaching from the Atlantic will struggle to move eastwards into the North Sea the way they normally would. Now, the Met Office has suggested in their recent 14-day outlook that a full Scandinavian high sweep is very unlikely. They're reforecasting temperatures at the end of the month to be slightly below average, but nothing too drastic. And I respect that assessment. They're being cautious. And rightly so at this range. But when we look at the model output, there is more to discuss. Multiple models have been showing this Scandinavian block for much of this week. It's persistent, it's not disappearing between runs. And whilst the exact details keep changing, the overall pattern is becoming clearer. The UKMO model shows low pressure approaching from the Atlantic over the next few days, but not winning. These systems push in, fizzle away, and clear to our north rather than tracking eastwards. Look at the final 24 hours of the UKV run. That low pressure to our west barely moves. It sits there. What does that mean for us? Well, we are going to stay reasonably unsettled over the coming days. Rain continuing to spiral in from the southwest, moving northwards. But slowly, that high pressure to our northeast will have more influence, especially across eastern areas. Let us talk temperatures. Tonight, frost in the north, further south, mid-single digits. Into Saturday afternoon, 7 to 8 degrees in the south, average to maybe just above average. Colder further north, but again, nothing unusual for mid-January. Sunday, frost where skies clear, afternoon temperatures 6 to 10 degrees. Monday, frost again with clearer skies. Cloud and a bit of rain keeping things milder in some spots. Afternoon temperatures mid to high single digits. Tuesday, frost in the west, slightly colder there. Further east, mid to high single digits. Nothing too extreme in that lot. Some areas slightly cooler, some slightly milder, but later next week, things start to shift. The GFS model has been fairly bullish over the past few days for very cold conditions. Yesterday, S-Run backed off a bit. Today, it's back on board. The operational run shows high pressure really starting to dominate Scandinavia. Initially, it's not oriented to pull in bitterly cold easterly winds. It just halts the jet stream. But around day 7, around next weekend, that changes. The GFS shows bitterly cold easterly winds developing, with heavy snow showers most likely piling in from the North Sea. Now, the high pressure collapses quite quickly in that run, so it might only be cold and snowy for a couple of days before settling into a drier, colder pattern. Interestingly, that high pressure system rebuilds. And we see another spell of easterly winds as we head into the final few days of January and into early February. Another push of cold or even very cold air. We're not tapping into the really bitterly cold continental air masses yet, not the extreme beast from the east type temperatures. But we are getting close. And you can see temperatures dropping well below average in some of those runs. Now, the GEM model has been a bit mixed. Some days very cold, other days not so much. What it's consistently showing is a battle between westerlies and easterlies. Out towards day 10, it's showing a cold but unsettled pattern. The block is up to our north, but not strong enough to pull in very cold air from the east. Instead, we end up with cold but rainy conditions. Low pressure coming in off the Atlantic. 4, 5, 6 degrees, maybe 7 with heavy rain. Precipitation bands moving through. Weather fronts pushing in, coming up against that cold block. Not a pleasant pattern, more miserable than wintry. The very cold air remains in the North Sea or just across the near continent, whilst we get cold rain. The ECMWF has also been mixed. It was quite early to pick up on colder easterlies last week, and it's continuing to show them in some runs. But it is not as quick to turn easterly later next week. It keeps things very unsettled into next week. Again, a battleground scenario. Low pressure off the Atlantic versus high pressure to our northeast. Eventually, easterlies do win in the ECMWF. But because it's more of a battle, we done to pull in the very cold easterly winds. We pull in cold air, but not as much of a long-fetched, direct, long-lasting easterly. A lot of that very cold air doesn't get tugged all the way to Western Europe. What we see instead is colder air with big battles going on. Towards the end of the run, a really brisk, strong easterly wind. Heavy snowfall with a low sinking southwards. But it's a marginal pattern. The rain-snow line or colder to less cold line is right over the UK. That line would be moving back and forth. A bit messy, but it would be cold. There would be some winteriness around. Now, I want to mention the AIFS model. This is the ECMWF run, but using machine learning. Artificial intelligence, essentially. Whereas the normal models use physics equations to simulate what could happen, this run looks at current conditions and asks, historically, what has happened when we've had similar starting conditions? It's a different approach. And it has different biases, hopefully fewer biases than physics models, which have to make certain assumptions. When we see a big difference between physics-driven models and AI data-driven models, it is worth noting. The AIFS has been very much on board with the easterly flow. Those lows sink south. Unlike the GEM, they don't push eastwards. They slide down towards the Mediterranean. Towards the end of the run, very cold easterly winds. Low pressure trying to penetrate from the Atlantic but not having any success. We stay in that very cold air pretty much from next weekend for the whole of the following week, eventually ending up with an even colder easterly by the end of that. Now, this doesn't mean it's definitely going to happen, but the data-driven model is definitely backing this pattern with the easterly winning out. Let S look at the ensembles. The GFS ensembles are very similar to yesterday, average to above average over the coming days. For London, 7, 8, 9 degrees. A degree or two above average, but nothing too noticeable. By the middle to end of next week, we trend close to average, then eventually, come next weekend, below average. And this is where some runs start to put in an easterly, most on T about a quarter to a fifth. But slowly, more and more into the final week of January, there are a lot of much colder runs. The ensemble mean gets down close to -4, -5. That's a fairly strong cold signal. I wouldn't say it S locked in, as there are still milder runs. We wouldn't expect it to be locked in anyway, being 7 to 10 days away. But there are very cold runs, those beast from the east type runs, -10 and lower. The operational run is at that level. There are other runs there as well, but not an overwhelming number. Maybe 7, 8, 9, or 10 at most that get down to that level at some point. That S a lot, but it S not an overwhelming number where we D say it S definitely a favoured scenario. It is the most favoured it S been all winter for that sort of depth of cold. But it S by no means guaranteed or a locked-in pattern at this stage. Still, definitely real interest. And it has trended that way this week. The ECMWF ensembles tell a similar story. A drop-off longer term, maybe not quite as cold with its general ensembles, but it's got quite a few very cold runs as well. Overall, slightly milder than the GFS, with more runs closer to average, still slightly below average, just not quite as cold. Maybe less bullish on the easterly. The IFS ensemble members are very much on board with that colder or bitterly cold pattern. The ensemble mean is probably even colder than the GFS by a degree or two, down towards -5, maybe -6, and there are a lot more runs down towards the -8 to -10 level. Then a good cluster still at -10 and below, including the operational AIFS model. So the point of inflection for very cold air to move in is in around a week's time. I suspect in the next 2 or 3 days, we'll have a much better idea on the timings of the potential easterly or cold easterly, and the depth of cold as well. I do think we'll have a bit of a breakthrough in the coming days where we either go one way or the other. Either the cold signal strengthens, all models come on board, and it's more 70 or 80% showing very cold rather than the 30 or 40% right now, or we go the other way where very cold becomes more of a minority option. We see more of a battleground scenario. It's very much at odds at the moment. I don't really want to call it. We've seen these patterns fail over the past few years. But there is a lot of interest, and I do think the final 5 days of January, maybe not as early as the 23rd or 24th, but 25th, 26th onwards into early February, there is a pretty strong chance it turns much colder. And if it turns very cold, down towards ice day levels, then of course a high chance of seeing further winteriness. With an easterly wind, that winteriness would be a lot more widespread and potentially a lot more severe for areas that didn't see much at all earlier on in January. Now, many of you remember the beast from the east in 2018. That was Siberian air. Temperatures dropped to -14 in places. Significant snow, particularly across eastern areas. We had the mini beast just weeks later in March. Not looking at that level of cold just yet. But the setup has similarities. High pressure over Scandinavia, low pressure trying to push in from the south or southwest. That contrast creates easterly winds. And if those easterlies are sustained, they drag continental air our way. The difference this time is the Atlantic is putting up more of a fight. In 2018, the Atlantic influence was minimal. This time, we've got weather systems trying to push in. That creates a battleground, and battlegrounds are messy. You get rapid swings, rain turning to sleet, turning to snow, the line between cold and very cold shifting back and forth. For those in Scotland, you are already dealing with the colder conditions. The Highlands have seen minus temperatures this week. You're well prepared. This is winter, as usual for you. For those across the south, particularly the southeast and East Anglia, proper cold is less common. I know some of you have been waiting for snow. You've gone several winters without a decent covering in some areas. This pattern has potential, but I'm not going to promise anything until we see how these systems develop. If the easterly does materialise, the heaviest snow would likely be across eastern counties: Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Kent. Perhaps Lincolnshire, Yorkshire coast. That's where the fetch from the North Sea would be longest. Showers streaming in off cold water, dumping snow as they hit land. Western areas, you to be drier, colder, certainly, frosty. But the precipitation would be focused east. Now let's talk about what you need to do. If you're in an area that doesn't see snow often, don't leave it until the day before. Check your supplies now. Torch batteries, candles, tinned goods. Make sure you've got enough medication if you or someone you care for needs it regularly. If you've got elderly neighbours, check on them. Make sure their heating is working, that they've got food in. A cold snap like this is hardest on the vulnerable. We saw that in 2018. We saw it in the freeze of 62 to 63. We don't need to see it again. For driving, if snow does arrive, don't go out unless you have to. If you must drive, slow down. Keep your distance. Black ice is a killer. It forms when temperatures drop after wet conditions, and you can see it until you are on it. If your car gets stuck, cardboard or an old carpet under the tyres increases traction. Works a treat. Many of you already know that trick. For those with animals, make sure livestock have shelter and water. Water troughs freeze quickly in sustained cold. Check them twice daily. Now, I mentioned earlier that we've been seeing temperature swings. One day 12 degrees, next day 3, then back up again. People have been poorly for weeks across southern areas. Sinus trouble, headaches, colds that 1T shift. That back and forth pattern ends if sustained cold moves in. There is some relief in that. Your body can adjust to consistent cold better than constant swings. But with sustained cold comes other risks. Hypothermia, slips and falls on ice, burst pipes if you're not careful, lag your pipes if you haven't already, let taps drip overnight if it gets really cold. That keeps water moving and reduces the chance of a freeze. The contrast across the country over the past week has been sharp. The Scottish Highlands saw -8 this morning. Central Cornwall experienced near double figures. That spread is about to compress as Arctic air pushes south. Right now, across Wales, you are dealing with heavy rain. That changes dramatically by Wednesday when colder air arrives. Rain could turn to sleet over higher ground, then snow if temperatures drop far enough. The southern Pennines were seeing rain this morning. Some areas are already reporting sleet starting to settle. That is how quickly this transition is happening. Northern Ireland has stayed largely dry, just a few showers towards the east. That continues into the weekend. But next week, colder air pushes your way as well. East Anglia, as I said, UV had rather boring conditions in recent weeks. Temperatures hovering around average, grey skies, not much to write home about. This pattern shift could change that, whether it's a battleground scenario with cold rain or a proper easterly with snow, time will tell. Birmingham and the Midlands, UV had a particularly quiet winter so far, 6 or 7 degrees, overcast, dull. That extended mild spell ends next week when the pattern changes. From Cornwall through Devon and into Somerset, it's been mild and damp. Temperatures running 5 to 8 degrees above seasonal average. Somerset saw flood warnings this morning. That mild, unsettled air mass sitting over the region shifts as high pressure builds to the northeast. Devon has enjoyed pleasant weather for the past fortnight, mild and dry. That feels like a distant memory by Friday. One thing to watch, dew points. These indicate wind direction. Atlantic airflow generally brings milder dew points. Continental airflow brings cooler dew points, regardless of whether it is a very cold air mass. You can have an air mass at 0 degrees, around average or above, but still have very cold dew points. It indicates dry continental air, potentially polar air. Looking at the longer range charts, colder dew points develop, some exceptionally cold dew points indicating dry continental air coming in. Sea level pressure is looking reasonably high across the ensembles. There are more wobbles from some runs. Those will be the runs like the ECMWF and GEM, where it S more of a battle with the Atlantic. The operational GFS, one of the coldest runs, has got one of the highest pressures. That S expected with high pressure centered closer, tucking in those easterly winds. Temperatures generally dropping off regardless of which ensemble member you look at. They are all cooling down, generally speaking. So yes, it might not turn bitterly cold, it might not be wintry, but it definitely looks like it is going to be colder into next weekend and the following week. 3, 4, 5 degrees for many areas. Now, there's been mention of the polar vortex split. That S worth watching. A split in the polar vortex can lead to prolonged cold spells across Europe. It allows Arctic air to spill southwards more easily. We're re-seeing signs of that in the upper atmosphere. Whether it translates to surface conditions is another matter, but it adds to the signal for cold. Sunspot activity is cresting at the moment. We've just had a coronal mass ejection hit. You can see auroras if you reef far enough north, and skies are clear. High pressure could reach 1045 millibars or higher. That is a strong block. Also a chance of heavy precipitation where systems try to push against it. It's spicy at the moment, as someone put it. And that's a fair description. The setup is interesting. The models are showing possibilities we haven't seen much of this winter. Whether it verifies is another story, but it's worth paying attention. Over the next few days, watch the model runs. If they start converging on a solution, confidence increases. If they keep diverging, well, we're still in the uncertain phase. But I think by Monday or Tuesday next week, we'll have a much clearer picture. For now, prepare for colder weather from next weekend onwards. How cold and how wintry remains to be seen. But the mild, unsettled pattern we've had is ending. That much is clear. Stay safe. Check on vulnerable neighbours. Take risks on the roads if snow arrives, and keep an eye on the forecasts as they develop. I'll continue monitoring the models and updating as we get closer. This is one of the more interesting patterns we've seen all winter. Whether it delivers significant snow or just a cold, dry spell, we'll know soon enough. But after weeks of grey, damp, unremarkable weather, at least there's something